Coming to you live from Nairobi, Kenya. Welcome to Africa Focus, where we bring you news from across the continent right here on Switch TV Kenya. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Start interacting with us on our social media platforms at Switch TV Kenya, at Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya and Joel Chacha. Send in an SMS via 22999 free of charge. But first, here are stories making headlines. Schools in Somalia reopened their doors 4 months after COVID-19 forced them to close. Angolan court sentences ex-leader's son to 5 years for fraud. The Catholic lawyers guild in Zimbabwe calls on the government to respect human rights amidst the arrest and incarceration of a prominent journalist and opposition leader. We begin with Africa Roundup stories.
Mutineering soldiers in Mali on Tuesday detained President Ibrahim Boubacar Keïta and Prime Minister Bobo Cisse. A leader who requested anonymity said that the president and the prime minister are under their control. He added that the pair had been arrested at Keïta's residence in the capital Bamako. Earlier, soldiers launched a mutiny from the nearby garrison town of Kati. Another military official, who also declined to be named, said the president and prime minister were in an armored vehicle en route to Kati. Mauritian authorities on Tuesday arrested the Indian captain of a Japanese-owned ship which ran aground off the island nation's coast, spewing tons of oil into pristine waters. The captain, who is an Indian citizen, and his deputy, who is from Sri Lanka, were charged under the Piracy and Maritime Violence Act and will reappear in court on August 25th. The MV Wakashio ran aground on a coral reef on July 25th and began oozing oil more than a week later, spilling more than 1,000 tons into powder blue waters. Authorities have yet to reveal why the ship, which was making its way from Singapore to Brazil, had come so close to the island. Hundreds of farmers and their vehicles from South Africa's Limpopo province blocked the roads of Mongopong, some 200 kilometers north of South Africa's capital Pretoria, in protest of brutal farm attacks, of which 128 were reported between January and June 2020.
Elsewhere, Sudan National Museum Director Haitem El Nur has said the museum shall be closed for lengthy renovations after years of neglect. The museum houses thousands of priceless antiquities dating back millennia.
The museum, which opened in the 1970s, is home to more than 2,700 objects, including some dating back to the Paleolithic period and important pieces from the ancient Egyptian pharaonic dynasties and from the Nubian culture.
متحف السودان القومي مغلق.
The Sudan National Museum has been closed since March 2020 due to the global health conditions of the COVID-19, and until now it is still closed. But this closure will continue from the 1st of September until the end of 2021, early 2022, for general renovations of the building.
حيتواصل من 1 سبتمبر.
A grant of $1 million United States has been put up by the Italian Agency for Development Cooperation to fund the works, which will be carried out under the supervision of UNESCO.
نحن وصلنا دعم من الحكومة الإيطالية.
We have received support from the Italian government, and this grant is carried out under the supervision of UNESCO, which is about $1 million. A generous and timely support for the maintenance of this building.
دعم سخي وفي زمن مناسب. The
museum will close on 1st September, with renovations to be finished by either late next year or early 2022. The irreplaceable items have been left collecting dust in the building for years, with no air conditioning to protect them from the scorching Sudanese temperatures. Now they will have to be carefully removed from the building and placed into underground storage to protect them from light before the work begins. When the museum reopens, now hopes to be able to put on display some of their treasures which have been uncovered over the past decade and never shown to the public. He also hopes the new museum will encourage tourism in the country, which has embarked on a new path since last year, shaking off 30 years of iron-fisted rule under dictator Omar al-Bashir.
Away from that, and now in the corridors of justice, the Catholic Lawyers Guild in Zimbabwe calls on the government to respect human rights amidst the arrest and incarceration of a prominent journalist and an opposition leader. Take a look.
Zimbabwe's government has accused the head of Catholic Bishops' Congress of stoking division and seeking to create a genocide after the group spoke out against alleged rights abuses and economic woes. On Friday, the Zimbabwe Catholic Bishops' Conference issued an unusually strong letter deploring the thwarting of anti-government protests on July 31st.
The pastoral letter denounced the current human rights situation in Zimbabwe and noted that the call for demonstrations is the expression of growing frustration and aggravation caused by the conditions that the majority of Zimbabweans find themselves in.
The bishops denounced the unprecedented crackdown on dissent and weighed in on Zimbabwe's long-standing social and economic crisis, which the government vehemently denies.
We're happy to present...
In a statement late Saturday, Information Minister Monica Mutsavangwa said the letter had been written under the evil-minded leadership of ZCBC President Archbishop Robert Ndlovu. Mutsavangwa accused Ndlovu, a member of Zimbabwe's Ndembele minority group, of fanning the psychosis of tribal victimization and sowing scenes of collective guilt among the Shona majority. She likened the Archbishop to Athanase Seromba, a Rwandan priest who was found guilty of crimes against humanity for facilitating the killing of Tutsis during the 1994 genocide. Zimbabwe's Catholic Lawyers Guild said it was deeply concerned by the vicious tribal attack on Ndlovu and reiterated the bishop's unease about the crisis in Zimbabwe.
As the Catholic Lawyers Guild, we demand the following from the government. 1. An apology and instruction of the vitriolic response given to the pastoral letter. 2nd, an assurance that no harm will befall the bishops on account of the pastoral letter.
In a statement on Sunday, they demanded an assurance that no harm will befall the bishops on account of the pastoral letter.
We demand respect for human rights. And 5th, we demand respect for the rule of law. And finally, that the government takes heed of the call by the bishops for an urgent plea to peace and nation building.
President Emmerson Mnangagwa administration has come under fire over its growing crackdown on dissent, including detentions, assaults and intimidation. The South African country's economy has been on a downturn for more than a decade, with recent surge in hyperinflation and shortages of fuel. But the government again on Saturday denied there was a crisis, even as the official statistics showed inflation soaring at almost 840%. At least 20 demonstrators were arrested for taking part in banned protests against alleged state corruption and economic hardship on July 31st. All have been charged with inciting public violence and released on bail. The Law Society of Zimbabwe on Sunday joined the bishops and international groups in denouncing the country's deteriorating human rights situation. Mutsavangwa's statement, published on the front page of Zimbabwe's Sunday Mail newspaper, sparked outrage on social media, where the hashtag Zimbabwean Lives Matter has been trending for the past week. The Opposition Movement for Democratic Change Alliance, MDC Alliance, condemned the incendiary hate speech and called on the government to apologize for the unacceptable remarks. Some 20,000 people were killed during the 1980s when late ex-president Robert Mugabe led a military-style crackdown on alleged militants known as Gukarahundi. The targets were mainly Ndebele, perceived as backing the opposition, while Mugabe was Shona.
Doing their legitimate work.
60 years after Gabon's independence, France's presence is still evident on every corner of the capital Libreville, from the Paul bakeries and French produce found in supermarkets to the Canal Plus antennas on rooftops and French military bases.
President Leon Mba is known to be the one who demanded not independence but departmentalization from France. And that idea, which was born from such a founding act, has continued to haunt relations between France and Gabon. One of the most striking symbols is that one of the military of de Gaulle camp installed in Libreville. It is a very strong physical symbol as well as being human symbol. France is Gabon's first partner. Naturally, it was France that we turned to when we had to bring consumer goods to the Gabonese because our local production is still low and you're working on it. I want to tell you that with a little more than 450 to 500 references, French wine is a priority in the cellar of the CK Gadi stores. So there's a very, very important presence of French wines here.
Services take place in France, but the PMUG gives us the program in advance.
Meanwhile, Algerians are discovering their small pleasures in life, beaches and coffee, while the faithful are returning to their mosque after 5 months of confinement due to the novel, or rather to the new coronavirus.
We thank God for the opening of the mosques. After a closure of more than 4 months, we are satisfied with the organization. The practitioners have answered the call and we hope that they will respect the rule of hygiene. We followed the procedures recommended by the Wilaya and the Ministry of Health. Among them, most important, which are the compulsory wearing of masks and the obligation for everyone to bring their own prayer mat. We have also decided to close until further notice. The access to the ablution room, the women's room, the Quranic school, as well as the places that can receive a lot of people. We are happy with the opening of the mosque. We thank God, as I noticed that people have respected the hygiene rules, which is a good thing because when we come to pray, it is to do a good deed and not to do a bad deed by contaminating others.
Time to take a breather. Stay with us here on Africa Focus. Still to come. "60 years after Congo gained independence from France, the names and faces of colonizers are still present in the capital of Brazzaville. Welcome back to Africa Focus. My name is Joel Church and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Moving on, the prime ministers of Sudan and Egypt say they're optimistic that the talks with Ethiopia on its controversial mega dam construction on the Nile will bear fruit. Egypt and Sudan view the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam as a threat to vital water supplies, while Ethiopia considers it crucial for its electrification and development.
Talks between Ethiopia, Egypt and Sudan were suspended last week after Addis Ababa insisted on linking them to renegotiating a deal on sharing the waters of the Blue Nile.
The two sides discussed the project of the Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, and it was stressed that there was a need to negotiate a binding agreement on filling and operating the dam in a manner that preserves the rights and interests of three countries.
Egypt and Sudan view the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam as a threat to vital water supplies, while Ethiopia considers it crucial for electrification and development.
In addition to the importance of agreeing on an effective and binding mechanisms for settling disputes and a mechanism for coordination between the three countries to ensure the safety of operating all water facilities and projects affected by the dam.
South Africa, which holds the presidency of the African Union, is mediating negotiations, has urged the countries to remain involved in the talks. On Saturday, Egyptian Prime Minister Mustafa Mabouli made his first official visit to Sudan since the formation of a transitional government in Khartoum last year. Following his talks with Sudanese Prime Minister Abdallah Hamdok, a joint statement was issued saying the negotiations are the only way to resolve the problems of the dam. The two premiers said they were optimistic regarding the outcome of the negotiations held under mediation by the African Union, according to the statement. It is important to reach an agreement that guarantees the rights and interests of all three nations, it said, adding that mechanisms to resolve future disputes should be part of any deal.
The two sides stressed the need to not take any unilateral measures before reaching a satisfactory agreement for the three parties. The two sides renewed their commitment to negotiations as the best way to achieve the interests of the people of the region. They also expressed their aspiration for the success of the ongoing negotiations under the auspices of the African Union.
Earlier this month, Egypt's water ministry said that Ethiopia had put up a draft proposal that lacked a legal mechanism for settling disputes. The guide has been a source of tension in the Nile River basin ever since Ethiopia broke ground on the project in 2011. Egypt and Sudan invoke a historic right over the river guaranteed by treaties concluded in 1921 and 1959. But Ethiopia uses a treaty signed in 2010 by 6 riverside countries advocated by Egypt and Sudan authorizing irrigation projects and dams on the river. Mabuli was accompanied to Khartoum by a delegation including Egypt's ministers of water, irrigation, electricity, health, and trade and industry. During his visit, Mabuli is expected to meet with General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, head of Sudan's ruling sovereign council, and Mohamed Hamdan Dagalo, county deputy chief and military general. Hamdok's office said the visit aimed to improve cooperation between the two neighboring counties. Daniel Kareki for AfricaFocus.
Meanwhile, Namibians react to Germans' offer to pay reparations for the Herero and Nama genocide in 1904-1908 after President Hage Geingob rejected the gesture as not acceptable, and countries continue talks over the colonial-era massacres.
Namibia's President Hage Geingob on Tuesday said reparations offered by Germany for mass killings in its then colony at the start of the 20th century were not acceptable and needed to be revised. German occupiers in Namibia killed tens of thousands of indigenous Herero and Nama people in 1904-1908 massacres, which historians have called the first genocide of the 20th century. In 2015, the two countries started negotiating an agreement that will combine an official apology by Germany as well as development aid. Geingob on Tuesday was briefed by his government's special envoy Zed Ngaviru on the status of negotiations. The briefing took place ahead of a final round of talks for which a date has yet to be set.
All right, we are talking about human life here. And once human life is lost, there's nothing that anyone can really do about it. There's no amount of money that can repay back a life that has been lost.
The president also noted that Germany had declined to accept the term reparations, as the word was also avoided during the country's negotiations with Israel after the Holocaust. Ngaviru rejected Germany's reference to reparations as healing the wounds and said the terminology would be subject to further debate, according to the statement.
I don't think the government should be so involved, since the people that were affected really have a team of people that represent them. I think the government should stand there as a stakeholder and whatnot. And
the government is going to what they have to do. They must just spend that money on the projects for the whole country, not to pay certain group and whatsoever, because all the people they will suffer. You see, just to put up the project to benefit all the countries, all the Namibian people.
Berlin was not immediately available for the comment on the claims. Germany has acknowledged that atrocities occurred at the hands of its colonial authorities, and some officials have even recognized it as a genocide. But the country has repeatedly refused to pay direct reparations, citing millions of euros in development aid to the Namibian government.
But I feel that it is very important that all the people of Namibia come together. And we are one. We are Namibians, and we must go on together.
Namibia was called German Southwest Africa during Germany's 1884 to 1915 rule, and then passed under South African rule for 75 years, finally gaining independence in 1990. Tensions boiled over in 1904 when the Herero rose up, followed by Nama in an insurrection crushed by German imperial troops. In the Battle of Waterberg in August 1904, around 80,000 Herero fled, including women and children. German troops went after them across what is now known as the Kalahari Desert. Only 15,000 Hereros survived. The German government has so far refused to apologize for the killings. Nyakundi Kelvin, AfricaFocus.
Elsewhere, Egyptian authorities gathered at the site of a heritage-listed building on Kasr al-Nile Street in the center of the Egyptian capital after it partially collapsed, injuring 5 people. An investigation has been launched to assess the cause of the sudden collapse of the building.
A security source said a listed building in the center of Egypt's capital partially collapsed, injuring 5 people on Saturday in the latest such incident. The source said authorities who rushed to the building on Kasr al-Nile Street near the iconic Tahrir Square attended to 14 people, including passers-by, and transported 5 to hospitals. Cairo's governorate said on its Facebook page that an investigation has been launched to assess the cause of the sudden collapse of the heritage-listed building. It said the damaged 4-story building housed several stores and 2 residential apartments. Building collapses in Egypt occur frequently due to lax enforcement of construction and maintenance regulations, as well as developers illegally adding floors to boost profits. In July, a building in the upmarket Cairo suburb of Zamalek, close to embassies, showed deep cracks, prompting authorities to evacuate residents fearing its collapse. One of the worst such urban disasters struck in 2014 when a Cairo building caved in, killing 19 people. Downtown Cairo boasts buildings that are nearly 200 years old, blending Islamic and European motifs, neoclassical columns, and ornate decorations. Many UNESCO listed have fallen into disrepair and ruin in Egypt's drive for urban renewal.
Shifting gears now to the corridors of justice, Angola's top court sentenced the son of ex-President Jose Eduardo dos Santos to 5 years in prison for diverting oil revenues, making him the highest-profile figures in the former regime to face jail for graft. 42-year-old Jose Filomeno dos Santos was summoned before the Supreme Court in December of allegations of embezzling up to $1.5 billion from Angola's sovereign wealth fund, which he oversaw from 2013 to 2018.
Nicknamed Zenu, dos Santos was charged with stealing $500 million from the fund and transferring it to a Swiss bank account. Now Zenu, the first member of the former presidential family to be prosecuted as part of an anti-graft campaign led by President Joao Lourenço, who came to power in 2017. Lourenço has mainly targeted the family members of his predecessor, who appointed relatives and friends to key positions during his 38-year rule, leaving a legacy of poverty and nepotism. Now both Zenu and Da Silva's lawyers told reporters they would appeal. My dissatisfaction is shown through our lodging an appeal immediately. The law gives us this prerogative, and we will use it to benefit our client. We do not accept this. In February, Angolan investigators froze the assets of Zenu's billionaire's half-sister Isabel dos Santos, dubbed Africa's richest woman by Forbes magazine, who is now being probed for a long list of crimes in Angola, including mismanagement, embezzlement, money laundering during her stewardship of the state-run oil giant Sonangol. 3 co-defendants, including the former governor of the National Bank of Angola, Valda Filipe de Silva, were also sentenced to between 5 to 8 years in prison for fraud, embezzlement, and influence peddling. All 4 are acquitted of money laundering charges despite previously denying any wrongdoings. Isabel was ousted as Sonangol's chair just months after Lourenço took power. She has, however, vehemently denied the accusations against her and denounced Luanda's actions as a politically motivated witch hunt. Daniel Kareki for AfricaFocus.
In the Congolese capital of Brazzaville, the names and faces of colonizers still present 60 years on from its independence from France, which the country celebrates on August 15th.
All these figures who were at the heart of colonization are in some way an insult against the Congolese people.
Imagine, the man who opened Congo to the world, King Makoko the First, does not have enough monumental representation in the city.
Monumental dans la ville.
You can just dismiss the history we've lived through together. As you know, it was from here that Brazzaville appeared started, in which General de Gaulle invited African troops to rally to liberate France, which was under German occupation.
allemande.
And in the case of Gibraltar, we remember that if we had a railway, it is because he was the one who thought that in order for a country to develop, we needed a railway that continues to provide us with services to this day for the transport of goods and passengers.
That's all here on Africa Focus, but keep the conversation going on our social media platforms, Switch TV Kenya, at Joel Chacha M on Twitter, and as well on Facebook, Switch TV Kenya. My name is Joel Chacha, and our sign language interpreter is Tracy Dorcas. Until next time, do have yourself a great day.